The Radio Misfits Podcast Network.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Planted with Sara Pine. I'm Sara Pine, your host. And today we are at MJBizCon in Las Vegas, and I have Daniel Cook, the CEO of True Terpenes, with me. Daniel, welcome to the show.
Hey, Sara. Good to be here.
Yeah, I'm so excited to geek out with you. I don't know if anyone told you this, but I love terpenes, so we're going to have a really good conversation today. But before we get into that, what brought you to Europe? Because you have a really interesting career, and we all have our pathways that we get into the industry. What drew you to the industry?
Yeah, so my mother's Peruvian. I'm a dual citizen with Peru. And I lived in Latin America 10 years and worked in wine. So I worked in frontier markets, and there's a lot in common when you're living in South America, Latin America, and working and living in the cannabis world. First, there's a lot of volatility. In South America, you can have inflation that's 5,000%, month to month. Mm-hmm. Very hard to plan for. The kind of whole earth can move from under you. There's a lack of really infrastructure and support, institutions, financing, support institutions. So the same thing that cannabis entrepreneurs experience in the U.S., a lot of entrepreneurs in any field experience in South America, where they just don't have that support. They don't have that infrastructure. It's not mainstreamed yet. And I also think there's a lack of kind of underlying trust. Mm-hmm. People build oftentimes for the short term because the long term is not guaranteed. And so all of that set me up really nicely. But the real connection under all of that was wine. I worked in wine both in Chile and Argentina. And with wine, you are curating genetics. You're tending to a very fragile plant. Mm-hmm. And you're really trying to harvest that and achieve the fullest, truest expression of that plant that can help shape the experience of consumers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And when we're looking at terpenes and what you do, how does that come into play in cannabis? Because some people will say, oh, well, there are terpenes in the plant, and they see like terpenes going into things like vape cartridges or possibly like certain edibles. But where does it, I know that there's so much more to it than that. Can you explain actually, before we get into that, because we have a lot of industry colleagues that listen, but we also have a lot of consumers in the market that are either consuming or kind of curious that may not understand what terpenes are. So maybe we should start with that.
Yeah. So really, cannabis is kind of poetry built up molecule by molecule. Mm-hmm. And terpenes is the language and the words behind that. So terpenes are a way for plants to communicate. And they create signals for plants, that they're ripe, right? Or that they create defense mechanisms, right? So when you walk through, a grape wine field and smell those grapes, that's terpenes. Or when you walk through a forest and, crush the evergreens under your foot, those are terpenes. Or peel an orange and you smell that smell, those are terpenes. So they're really the most potent molecules in a variety of plants, not just cannabis. There's about 150 terpenes in cannabis that have been, demonstrated and qualified, characterized. But they're also in, a really infinite array of other plants as well.
And I love that conversation because that's part of the normalization with cannabis. When you explain to somebody that those precious volatile molecules exist in every plant, and it's what's the scent, the flavor, and when we look at cannabis, it's also what dictates the spectrum of feel. Mm-hmm. People's eyes open and they're like, wow, it really is just a plant. Because with stigma, and now when we're in a CPG market especially, I think people have become very separated from the fact that it is just a plant.
Yes. There are misconceptions about terpenes, and one of the common misconceptions is, oh, well, it's just a flavor. It just adds, aroma and flavor, to a product or to the plant. Couldn't be furthest from the truth. It's really the architecture of experience with terpenes. So it really shapes the experience that you have with cannabis products and other products as well. There is a functional, physiological benefit from these terpenes. And, we like to say that, cannabinoids in cannabis may be the engine, but terpenes are the steering wheel. It really helps get you to where you want to go.
Yeah. Well, and that's, I think, some of the magic of it, because when you look at like the race to the top with THC, people don't necessarily understand that THC is not the end all be all. You can actually have something that's relatively low in THC with a really interesting terpene profile. And also, depending on how it behaves with your body chemistry, it can actually feel more intense than something with a higher THC content, but maybe a different terpene profile, maybe even, something that when you'd compare something that's fresh and has been kept at a certain temperature level so that those terpenes aren't evaporating versus something that's been stored differently. And so you're getting more of the cannabinoids, but you're losing a lot of the effects of those precious oils.
Yes. And, let's not undersell the plant. Cannabis is an incredibly complex plant. There are up to 1,000 compounds found in cannabis. In a really good Bordeaux wine, there's about 800 compounds found in the wine. But let's not undersell it. And there's so much more beyond the cannabinoids. As important as cannabinoids are, it's really the synergy, it's the entourage effect, as we know, that delivers that, the full experience.
Yeah.
Right.
One thing I was really impressed with your company about is when we first started having conversations more about terpenes, and we were seeing them put in a lot of products, people weren't understanding the fact that, like, for me, I also have a background in aromatherapy.
Mm-hmm.
So when you look at essential oils, most essential oils you don't put on your body neat. A lot of them behave as solvents, like especially with the terpenes. Like when you look at like consumer brands that are non-cannabis, like you'll see limonene and different things in there, and they're acting as antibacterial. Some of them have solvent properties, and people have not been as careful about thinking about what happens with how much you put in, or what happens when it's heated and what that does to the body. But your company has been really conscientious about your blends and the effects and the toxicity. And I think that that is a standard that needs to be upheld throughout the industry. And I don't know that everybody's clued into that yet.
January is that time of year that a lot of us are drinking less, but we're still looking for ways to relax, connect, and unwind. One option I really like, especially for dry January, is dry herb cannabis. And PAX makes some of the best dry herb vaporizers out there. What I love about dry herb vaping is that you're not burning the flower. You're gently heating it instead. That means that you actually get to taste the plant, the terpene profile, the nuance, the flavor, just the way the grower intended. It's smoother than smoking, there's no hangover, and it feels like a more mindful, intentional way to enjoy cannabis. It still gives you that ritual at the end of the day, just without the booze. So if you're losing the alcohol this month but not the relaxation, lose the booze, keep the buzz. Go dry, stay high. Learn more about Dry Herb January at PAX.com. PAX products are for adults 21 and older. And just for our listeners, you can use the code PLANET20 for 20% off your purchase at PAX.com, valid through the end of 2026.
Yes. And for us, it really starts with the origin story, for the company. The reason why this company was created 10 years ago, the founder had an autoimmune disorder and was on a range of pharmaceuticals that really robbed him of quality of life. He discovered cannabis and terpenes, and that really, regained him his quality of life and set him off on a journey to really research and understand what's behind these complex molecules. And he founded True Terpenes because he saw a lack of a standardized supply chain to reintroduce terpenes back into cannabis products. And it was really built on those principles. So we're built to last. We make decisions for the long run, not for the short run. It's hard to do in such a volatile world like cannabis. But at every corner, when I joined the company 5 years ago, I wanted to understand what I was joining. And when you look back at the history of the company and the decisions that were made at different points, these were decisions that set a foundation for the future, not just for our company, but really to contribute to a sustainable industry. And so these are things like, we were the first to be ISO certified, GMP certified. No one was asking us to do that. We had the most stringent thresholds for solvents and pesticides, right? 130 pesticides tested. No one was even close to that. And government wasn't asking us to do that. Mm-hmm. We set the standard. We didn't wait for the standard. 5 years ago, we created a toxicology program, right? Where we looked at the blends and the compounds and thresholds by which we want to formulate. Mm-hmm. So as we don't introduce unsafe products into the marketplace. And when you think about whether it's purity or whether it's consistency or whether it's quality control, it really starts with standards, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. And sometimes in cannabis, you have to set the standards because they didn't exist before, right? There's a vacuum. It continues with process. You have to introduce process at every level of your organization. So there's structure and there's a pathway to create consistent, safe products. And it really, culminates with people. Not only do you need the standards and the process, but your people have to buy into the system because your people are the ones at every day, every batch, every product, every release that you do, they have to be the guardians of quality, of consistency, of safety. And they can make individual decisions that kind of protect that, sort of ethos.
Yeah. What are some exciting things that you're working on now?
A lot of exciting things right now. One of the things that is really missing from cannabis is a lexicon to really talk about not only the chemoscape, but the different aromas from cannabis.
Mm-hmm.
This was something that in wine was missing as well. In the early 1980s, a woman, she was a sensory scientist from UC Davis. She developed the standardized lexicon for wine to talk about wine. This was the early 80s, and she developed this standard, which was adopted by the industry, the wine industry globally, sommeliers, wine critics, winemakers, and consumers to understand what they were talking about when they were talking about different varietals, different expressions, and this sort of thing. So we're contributing to the development of a lexicon for this. And the other thing that's interesting, we've talked about terpenes, and there are more common terpenes and more rare terpenes. But terpenes also is not the entire story. There's volatile sulfur compounds and other very fragile minors that are found in parts per million, parts per billion, and really do shape experience. There's a misconception that percentage, rules,
Mm-hmm.
and it couldn't be furthest from the truth. Because you can have thiols or esters, right, in minuscule amounts in a product, and it can flip the whole experience, right? And so those are very difficult compounds to capture and to retain in cannabis products. And we're on a multi-year journey to really look at how do you identify, characterize those, understand how they contribute to the product experience, but then create products that retain those. Because again, they're very light molecules, and they're the first things to burn off. And so whether it's through extraction, off-gassing, or degradation on the shelf, that's what gives character and depth and nuance to cannabis products. That is the first thing to go. And if we want to move towards a world where you have differentiated, high-value products and not commodities,
Mm-hmm.
you have to study those compounds, understand how they contribute to product experience, and really work to capture those. And it's hard. It's like catching sand.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to ask you a file question. So for years as an educator, people would always ask me, what terpene is it that gives that like fuel, like gassy aroma to certain cultivars? And I was told not too long ago that it's actually a thiol that does it. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes. Thiols contribute at very, very small parts,
Mm-hmm.
per million, per billion. They contribute a skunky or a gassy characteristic. And thiols, again, not just found in cannabis, can be found in other products and other plants.
Mm-hmm.
But it is so potent that if you put 3 drops of thiol into an Olympic-sized swimming pool,
Mm-hmm.
you'd be able to pick up that scent.
That's powerful.
It is powerful. People also underestimate the power of the human nose. It's been downplayed for years, and there have been some breakthroughs. There's a breakthrough in 2018, which is very recently, where they compared the human nose and the power of the human nose against other species, including a vampire bat, a field mouse, dogs, and we performed very well. We performed in the top 5 of the species. Dogs were first,
Mm-hmm.
but even with dogs, we beat them on a few compounds in terms of identifying those compounds.
Really?
Absolutely. And what you should probably understand about the human nose and the sense of smell, it's incredibly potent. It is the only sense that we have that goes right to the brain. It bypasses the thalamus and goes right to your olfactory bulb. And so what that means is you smell, through your nose or retronasally and incorporate those smells. It goes to your brain, it bypasses reason, and it has an impact on memory, on pain, on pleasure, on experience.
Mm-hmm.
And it happens immediately. When you smell something, it could transport you back 20 years.
Yes.
Right.
I've had that. I think everybody's had that where it's like all of a sudden they smell something and it just brings you back to something that maybe you haven't thought of in a very long time. And it's actually like you feel it in your body.
Absolutely. It's right to emotion, it's right to experience. And so, when we talk about taste with cannabis products can have an influence as well,
Mm-hmm.
but it's more one-dimensional. It's sweet, it's salty, it's bitter, it's sour, right? It's umami,
Mm-hmm.
right? with smell, it's the human nose. There's this study by the Rockefeller University, about 10 years ago, that showed through mathematical models that the human nose can identify 1 trillion unique scents.
Wow. We have, we always look at, other animals and say that, as far as vision and scent, that they're so superior to us. But I think we forget we're animals too.
We do. We forget we are, and it's an incredibly powerful, part of our human experience.
Yeah. So when I started out working in a dispensary, and one of the things, it was back in the day when we were doing deli style weighing out, so people actually got to smell the jar that I was going to weigh out. And one of the things that we used to say was the nose, because there were patterns that we would see. Like there's this one flower that's really polarizing called red Congolese. Mm-hmm. And it has, like, for people, I've noted that it didn't work well with their body. Mm-hmm. They didn't like the aroma. But I had other consumers that would come in and they liked to use it for things like going to the gym because it was a very active land race. They couldn't get enough of the aroma. Have you seen anything in your studies about like preference with somebody's personal olfactory and effects?
There's a lot of, even beyond cannabis. So this is true. This happens. And it's not just based on personal preference. Sometimes it can be based on genetics. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it can be based on the fact that when you're taking in, it's a very interesting process. When you smell these aroma molecules in, there's almost like a lock key system mm-hmm. that, based on your genetic, based on your physical makeup, can really determine how you incorporate, how you react to those molecules, as it goes to the brain. So this is something we've seen in a variety of industries, and it happens. And there's more to it than just personal preference.
Yeah. I just remember, like, I have a whole kit of like aromatherapy oils at home that I just, some of them are things like tea tree oil or lavender, which, sure. have different topical uses. But then I have a grapefruit oil that I really love, that when I'm having a day that I might be feeling a little bit blue or tired, if I smell that, it's like it just lifts my spirits. Mm-hmm. And I feel like, that's how I feel when I smell a really fresh bag of cannabis. Now, when we're looking at the volatility of the oils and the way people should be storing it, when I work a lot with cultivators, and one of their biggest concerns is that they keep all of their flowers at a certain level or a certain temperature to make sure that the terpenes are intact. And they say, we jar it. Then when we go to the distributor's really good about temperature. Yeah. But all bets are off when it goes to the dispensary. Can we talk a little bit about temperature and volatility so people can understand that a little better?
Sure. And we learned the hard way too. The company started with botanical terpenes 10 years ago, but we've been on a journey for the past 5 years to really get closer to the plant. And we've gone through, 5 harvests of type 3 cannabis. So low THC burden, mm-hmm. but with the popular strains and the high aroma profiles that everybody loves. And we've grappled with this firsthand at every stage of the value chain. So we've grappled at this with, how do you care for the plant in the field? How do you harvest? We hand harvested 100 acres, mm-hmm. ourselves. Mm-hmm. And that's hand harvesting 100 acres is a huge lift. And then it was the race to freeze that as quickly as possible to retain those, those volatile aroma molecules as much as we could. And, we learned a lot through the process, but you have to halt that process by which those volatiles are burned off. And if they're sitting in the hot, Washington sun in September, mm-hmm. it's not going to help. And so it does arrest that process of degradation. It was something we learned the hard way, is managing that cold chain.
Yeah. How do consumers preserve the terpenes with their products? What's the best practice?
In terms of which part for consumers?
So if a consumer, say they bought an eighth of something that they really enjoy, mm-hmm. how can they properly store that to make sure that...
Understood.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's not really, it's more of a cool, dark place. You don't want to, I would think about it more as like a cigar humidor, mm-hmm. rather than you want to put it in a freezer.
Yeah.
Right. For us, what we were trying to do is a little bit different than a consumer, because we were trying to completely freeze it and retain it so we could not consume it, but then actually use it for extraction and other processes. So it's a little bit different. For a consumer, definitely don't put it in the freezer, don't put it in the fridge. Think a humidor, cool, damp, humid place with no light.
With no light. Yeah, because that really degrades things.
Correct.
Yeah. So we were talking a little bit about the evolution of the company. But how has the early vision of the company evolved as the cannabis and hemp markets have been maturing? Because we've seen a lot of change in the past 10 years.
Yeah, absolutely. The early vision really is the through line to today. We talked about it. Really making decisions that are durable, for not only for us but for the industry. In terms of our evolution, I think the proximity to the plant that we have now, and the understanding of the volatile compounds and the complexity of the plant, because we've managed every part of that value and supply chain. And we've been in, genetics, we've been in harvesting, we've been in extraction, we've been in post-processing. So that's a huge journey for us that had its challenges, had its obstacles. There's a quote, it's not what you get, it's who you become. And, this was a really kind of overcoming those obstacles made us who we are today so that we can be better at what we do today. And so that was a huge part of the journey. And I'd say within that, and one of the things we're incredibly excited about is harnessing the minors beyond the terpenes. We're called true terpenes, but it's not just terpenes for us. And so we're working a lot with the thiols, the aldehydes, the ketones, the esters, studying those. There's a lot more research that has to come out of this to really understand those, to put those in the lexicon that we're talking about as well, so people kind of can align on what they mean, and really to honor the plant and the complexity of the plant.
Yeah. And what are some of the misconceptions that people have about terpenes?
I would say the first one, we mentioned it briefly. The first one is that it's really just about flavor. And I would say within flavor, not understanding the nuance and difference between flavor in your mouth and aroma, which is both, through your nose, retronasal with your mouth, and also through your nose right to the front. So that's a big one. I'd say the other one is, percentage matters less than potency. Right. We talked about some of the minors, like the thiols, and you don't need to look at the percentage of thiols to understand the power of thiols. It could be at a very minor percentage and really shape the experience of the plant. And I'm not sure if people kind of quite comprehend that yet. People tend to gravitate towards percentages because it's just easier, to evaluate and to understand.
Right.
And it's a process. There's an education process over time for people to understand the plant and kind of what is better. And I think having high THC products is great, but even the high THC products should have those other compounds, those other volatiles to round that experience out. And I think mid-level THC products are great. Same thing, honor the complexity. And low THC, great. I think the more you can kind of open it up, not be provincial, open it up to more people so they can get the benefits and pleasure and relief from this.
This episode is brought to you by Fat Nugs Magazine, a global perspective of cannabis and stoner culture as a bridge to the rest of the world. Right now, you can join Fat Nugs Magazine, Beard Bros Farms, Freedom Grow, and Jailed for Weed in the upcoming Prisoners Edition and help spotlight current and past cannabis prisoners and their stories, because no one should be in jail for a plant. Find Fat Nugs Magazine's beautiful print copies at your local dispensary, fatnugsmag.com, and on socials. Cannabis culture welcomes us all.
Yeah, and one thing that I've noticed too is for people who may not be able to partake in THC, like my brother-in-law has a government job, so he can get randomly tested. He was having problems with sleep, and I had a dear friend who had access to beautiful terpene blends that replicated different plants, and he had put them in a sugar tablet format. So I gave him some of those, and at the time I was like, I don't know if this will do anything because you're not having any cannabinoids or anything, so we're not having that meshing of, the effects. But he slept like a baby, and he was so happy to have something that was plant-based but wouldn't get him in trouble.
Correct. And we've done some work. Dr. Ethan Russo has been close to True Terpenes for years now, and we had some collaborative work where we developed terpene-only, effects-based blends for sleep, for pain, for relief. And, that can also work. what's needed here is more research on the terpenes. We've supported studies at Johns Hopkins, at UCLA, to look at specific terpenes and determine what are the functional physiological benefits of those terpenes. We need a lot more research there. And the research around the power of aroma to drive pleasure rather than just THC is also growing. There was an EEG study that was done, it was supported by PAX on the East Coast, where they looked at a high aroma versus a high THC strain and measured brain activity on it. And there was more than 2 times the amount of brain activity on the high aroma strain that they measured. Another study was done in Oregon, where the Cultivation Classic, where they took 300 consumers and they took some of the best craft growers in Oregon and really studied, double-blind, studied how they reacted to different strains. And again, aroma was really driving pleasure. But it's a process. Sometimes on the shelf, it's easier to say, hey, this is better because it has more THC. It's an easier sell. You don't have to educate. You don't have to bring along. But for a more sustainable future, and if I was a brand, I wouldn't want to participate in that race to the bottom, because competing off of a number is very difficult.
Yeah, and when you look at the outcomes, because you want to set your consumer up for success. You want to guide them through it and educate them so that they can have satisfying outcomes. That's how we engage people, and people actually get excited about it. If you give somebody a high THC product and they have a bad experience, or it doesn't have the terpene profile that works well with their body, and that creates a bad experience, that consumer may never go after something different that could be quite pleasurable or almost helpful.
Yes. And one of the things we encourage, and our clients are some of the most exciting cannabis brands out there, and we encourage them to look at the market in a very comprehensive way. There's different, and really understand for the products that you're making, what is the intention in terms of the consumer that's going to be enjoying that product, and what are they looking for, and really being precise about delivering to that, and understanding kind of what is behind that, and how do you build a product that meets that need. And we encourage a diversified portfolio, because there are much different reasons that people participate in this. It's different than wine in this way. There's so much, there's such a far range of uses, applications, benefits of cannabis. And so you have to be very, I would say, precise and intentional about how you build the products, and know where they're going, and make sure that it meets that need.
When we're talking about products, what kind of products do you engage in with your terpenes? Like what companies or what companies, and maybe not the names of the companies,
Sure.
but what formats are best suited for your terpenes?
Sure. I mean, the traditional segment for us has been vapes. Great application. Pre-rolls right now is the fastest growing and really emerging. But it's not limited to just that. That's the kind of meat of the market. But we're also talking about gummies. We're talking about beverages, tinctures. The applications are really limitless in terms of where you could use terpenes.
That's wonderful. And then the formulations, how are you working on formulations with people? What are you excited about around that too?
Yeah. The way we look at formulations and engaging with clients is, first, have empathy. These are cannabis brands. It's really hard to be a cannabis brand. And so we try to understand their position, their current portfolio of products, what's working, what's not. And then, we have 5,000 clients, and those 5,000 clients sell almost $10 billion worth of cannabis products each year. So we see tons of data, and we're really trying to overlay that data with hedonics and understand where real economic opportunity is for our clients. And so we'll do almost a portfolio audit of our clients' products, see what they might be missing, what they perhaps could do better, and then recommend a strategy for them first. So we're much more of a strategic advisor. We're not an ingredients vendor. We happen to monetize with ingredients by selling the ingredients, but it's first build the plan, build the right product portfolio with the right intention, the right direction, and then we'll formulate based on that. We'll formulate products that will meet those needs with our sensory team. And then we'll go through a very rigorous process by which we evaluate the sensory on those products and really trial those with the clients before rolling those out.
That's fascinating. I don't think that people really understand that, how necessary it is to have a partner in that. Before we wrap up, and I would love to have you back on again because we have so much more to talk about. What is something that you'd like to share with our audience that you think is really important for them to keep in mind?
I would say just keep exploring the plant. It's deep, it's complex. There's so much to learn about it. And if you go a layer deeper, if you go into the aroma, you go behind the numbers, into the experience, it has a whole world to open up for you.
And if people want to learn more about your company and what you do, how do they go about doing that?
You can go to trueterpenes.com. Our LinkedIn is very active with new studies, new products, new data that we have, new initiatives. So LinkedIn's a great place as well.
Thank you so much for joining me. It's been a pleasure talking with you. I could geek out with you on this all day, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your BizCon because I know it's crazy for all of us.
It is. Thank you, Sarah. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And everyone, remember, if you like listening, please give us a review, share it with a friend. Let us know what your favorite episodes are. And if you'd like to stay in touch over social media, we are Planted with Sara Pion on Facebook and Planted with Sara on Instagram and Twitter. You can also go to our website, www.plantedwithsara.com, or listen to us on our parent network, Radio Misfits Network, where there are other great podcasts like one of my favorites, the Winemakers Podcast. So check it out. You can listen to Planted wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, whether that's Pandora, Spotify, Amazon, Google, Apple, Stitcher, TuneIn. We are there. So join us. And until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and remember, it's a wild world out there. Be good to one another. Until next time, take care.